Welcome, everyone, to the Ramana Maharshi International Satsang, based here in San Diego, California. Let us welcome our special guest every first Sunday of the month from London, the International Ramana Maharshi scholar, Michael James. Michael, it's very good to see you as always today.
Thank you.
For those of you watching us on YouTube, and the number continues to grow, Michael joins us every first Sunday at 10 a.m. here. That's California time. If you'd like to join us live on Zoom with Michael, you are certainly welcome to do so and ask questions of him live during this 2-hour program. Just write to me, Ted, at newsguy55@aol.com. Newsguy55@aol.com. And I'll put you on our mailing list. We also study Ramana's teachings for 90 minutes every Sunday that Michael is not here, and you are certainly invited to join us at that time as well. So let's get started now with our first question. And Michael, it comes from Vishu. It's a good question, as they all are today. He says, I have been doing self-inquiry for the past few years. I find it far easier to do self-inquiry when my eyes are closed, which is only during my meditation times, mornings and evenings. During the major part of the day, when my eyes are open, I find it quite difficult as my attention is split elsewhere on objects. During those times, my mind tends to internally utter Om Arunachala Ramanaya. I sometimes use a picture of Bhagavan as well. Question: how do I remain in the self-inquiry process even when my eyes are open and when I attend to my worldly duties? Do you have any tips to achieve this state, Michael?
Yes. Well, firstly, we need to think about this carefully. Do we cease to exist when we open our eyes? Do we cease to be aware of our existence when we open our eyes? Obviously not. We are always aware, I am. So if we are able to attend to ourself, attend to our being, attend to I am, when our eyes are closed, we should equally well be able to do so when our eyes are open. The implication in this question is that when our eyes are open, our mind is distracted by other things. But if we are honest with ourselves, even when our eyes are closed, our mind tends to be distracted, because what distracts our mind is not the objects of the world, but our interest in the objects of the world. So when our eyes are open, our sight is going here and there. Or even if our sight isn't going here and there, our mind is going here and there. We're thinking about this and that. But the same is the case when we sit and close our eyes. Our minds had exactly the same degree of inclination to attend to things other than itself, whether the eyes are open or closed, whether we are doing anything or not doing anything. The inclination to attend to things other than ourselves are what are called Vishaya vasanas. That is, we have so many inclinations to attend to this and to that. The reason why, or the primary reason why our inclinations to attend to things other than ourselves are so strong is that our very existence as ego depends on attending to other things. As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, he describes ego as a formless demon. It is formless because it has no form of its own. In its formless condition, it also has no separate existence, because what separates one thing from another are their limitations, and limitations are what causes forms to be. So in its formless state, I is just pure awareness, limitless, indivisible pure awareness. But as ego, we have this strong inclination to grasp form, that is to identify ourselves with a form and thereby to experience other forms. So in that verse, he says, verse 25, he begins by saying, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So what Bhagavan makes clear by this is ego has a very strong inclination to grasp form, because without grasping form, ego cannot come into existence. Ego cannot stand, that is, it cannot endure, and it cannot feed itself. So, yes, that is, as I say, ego cannot come into existence without grasping form. That is, ego has a separate existence only when it identifies itself as a form. And the form that it always identifies itself with is a body. A body means not just the physical form of the body, but the entire package, the entire person. That is the physical form of the body, the life that animates that body, and the mind, intellect, and will that function within that body. These five are called the panchakosha, the five sheaths. And this is what we experience as I whenever we rise as ego. So without identifying ourselves as a form, we have no separate, we as ego have no separate existence. We seem to have a separate existence only because of our identification with the form of this body. So grasp the form we grasp as soon as we come in, as soon as we rise as ego, is the form of a body. And we cannot stand, that is, we cannot endure as ego without constantly identifying this body as I. So that the first two sentences, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. There, the form referred to is the form of a body. But having grasped the form of a body as I, we then are constantly grasping other forms. That is, through the five senses of this body, we project a world, and we are constantly attending to the world. And when we're not attending to the external world, there's an internal world of thoughts and feelings and emotions and fantasies, imaginations, memories. All these things are going on within the mind, and all the intellectual activities and the likes and the dislikes. Or there's a whole world inside, and there seems to be a world that seems to be outside. So these are all projected as soon as we rise as ego. So by attending to these, this is how ego feeds itself. So that's why in the third sentence, Bhagavan says, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. So the ego cannot exist, it cannot endure, they cannot come into existence, it cannot endure, and it cannot feed itself without constantly attending to forms. Forms means not just physical forms, it means any phenomena is a form of one kind or another. Anything that is in any way distinguishable from any other form anything that is distinguishable from any other thing is a form. So when it doesn't grasp a form, ego is formless, so it has no separate existence. It is just the underlying reality, the pure awareness. It's only when it grasps form that it seems to have a separate existence as ego. Since our very existence depends on this, we have very strong inclination to be constantly grasping form. Grasping form means attending to things other than ourselves. Ego itself is formless, so all forms are things other than ego. So it's by attending to things other than itself that ego comes into being, endures, and nourishes itself. Therefore, our Vishaya vasanas, our inclination to attend to Vishayas, that's forms, objects, phenomena, are very strong. And we are, from the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to sleep at night, we are constantly attending to some form or other, either gross or subtle. So when we are investigating ourselves, we are trying to turn our attention away from all forms, away from all phenomena, back towards ourself, the one to whom all phenomena appear. So in self-investigation, we're not attending to any object. We're not attending to any phenomenon. We're not attending to any form. We are attending to ourself, the awareness in whose view all these phenomena appear and disappear. So whether our eyes are open or closed, the inclination to attend to things other than ourselves will be very strong. So if we think that I can attend to myself when my eyes are closed, but I can't when my eyes are open, we have to consider, are we really attending to ourselves even when our eyes are closed? So attending to ourselves means attending to our being, attending to this fundamental awareness I am. This is ever present, but I mean, that is what we actually are. This awareness I am is what we actually, it's our very being. So obviously it's ever present. But though it's ever present, though we are always aware I am, we tend to overlook I am because we are more interested in other things. We are more interested in other things because of our Vishaya vasanas, our inclination to experience things other than ourselves. So the challenge we face, whether is the same, whether our eyes are open or closed. The challenge is letting go of everything else and holding on to ourselves. As Bhagavan says in verse 16 of Upadeshondya, Veli vidayangale vittu. That means letting go of all external vishayas, all phenomena. Manam tan oli uru ordale, the mind knowing its own form of light. Its own form of light means its own awareness. That is the real awareness. So that is the practice of self-investigation. Letting go of other things by attending to ourselves. If we merely, there are various yogic exercises, pranayama and other associated exercises, which are techniques by which we can let go of everything else. We can stop thinking. But the result of that is a sleep-like state. Every night when we fall asleep, we withdraw our attention from all forms, and therefore we dissolve back into our source. But because we do so without attending to ourselves, we do not experience ourselves as we actually are, and so we rise again as ego sooner or later. So our aim in self-investigation is not merely letting go of other things. We let go of everything else when we fall asleep. Our aim in self-investigation is holding on to ourself. Holding on to ourself means being self-attentive, trying to focus our attention on our own being, I am. This fundamental awareness I am. So that the doing so is actually extremely easy. The reason it's that, as Bhagavan made very clear in the song Atma-vichara, the refrain of that song was written by Mudragana, but Bhagavan wrote the verses explaining the meaning of, explaining the reason for what Mudragana said in the refrain. In the refrain, Mudragana said, Aye ati sulapam, Atma-vichara aye ati sulapam. That means extremely easy, extremely easy. Knowing oneself extremely easy. So this practice is actually very easy, but though it is actually very easy, it seems to us to be difficult. The reason it seems to be difficult is because we have so much liking to attend to other things. So until we are ready to surrender ourselves completely, to let go of everything and to merge back into our source, we have to make effort to fix our attention on ourselves and to hold on to self-attentiveness. And during this practice, our attention will be repeatedly slipping away. We tried to hold on to the self-attentiveness. We're able to do so for a few moments. And then again, our attention gets diverted away towards something else. We have to bring it back towards ourselves again and continue doing this. However many times our attention slips away, that's why Bhagavan, in the 6th paragraph of Nana, described this process as whenever any thought, as soon as any thought appears, then and there we need to investigate to whom it has appeared. Investigating to whom it has appeared doesn't mean asking the question, to whom is this thought? That is not what Bhagavan means. When he says investigate, he means we need to turn our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom all these things appear. So it's a very nice clue Bhagavan gives us there. But whatever may appear, it appears to whom? To me. So I turn my attention back to myself. And having turned our attention back to ourselves, we need to try to hold on to self-attentiveness. So the answer to this question, any tips? The only tip, the tip that Bhagavan has given us, persistent practice. There is no shortcut. We need to continue trying to practice, trying to hold on to that self-attentiveness. Whether we are engaged in other activities or sitting quietly with our eyes closed, we need to try to attend to ourselves as much as we can. When we have no other work, when we are sitting quietly, just with the intention of attending to ourselves, we may be able to we can hopefully go a bit deeper in the self-attentiveness. But that doesn't mean that at other times when we're engaged in our work, but we can't be holding on to self-attentiveness. Because whatever we may be doing, who is doing it? I am doing it. Whatever we may be seeing or hearing or tasting or touching, who is it? Who is experiencing it? I am. So I is the heart of our experience. It's the center of our all experience. There cannot be experience without an experiencer. So our aim in self-investigation is not to attend to anything that is experienced, but only try to attend to the experiencer. Whose eyes are open? Who is seeing all these sights? I am. Whose eyes are closed and not seeing anything? I am. We need to constantly be bringing our attention back to ourselves. So it has nothing to do with whether our eyes are open or closed. If we think we're able to do it with our eyes closed but not with our eyes open, we need to ask ourselves, are we actually attending to ourselves? If we're able to attend to ourselves when our eyes are closed, then why shouldn't we equally well attend to ourselves when our eyes are open? So we need to think carefully about this, understand correctly, and try as much as possible to be self-attentive. Persistent practice is absolutely essential. Bhagavan makes this clear in the 6th paragraph of Nana. What he says in this paragraph is, I'll just read the first half of the paragraph, because it's a very significant, I'll just read the English meaning. Only by the investigation, who am I, will the mind cease or subside. What he implies there, to bring about the permanent subsidence or cessation of the mind, the investigation, who am I, is the only means. Then in the next sentence, instead of using the term the investigation, who am I, he uses the term the thought, who am I. But the thought, he's using the term thought here in a metaphorical sense to refer to the investigation. So what he refers to as the thought, who am I, is exactly the same as what he refers to as the investigation, who am I. In other words, being self-attentive. So in the next sentence he says, the thought, who am I, destroying all other thoughts, will itself in the end be destroyed like a corpse burning stick. That is when a funeral, when a corpse is being burnt on a funeral pyre, in order to ensure that it's burnt thoroughly, someone will be standing there with a stick, and whenever any embers or anything falls out of a fire, they push it back into the fire. So they continue stirring it to make sure the entire corpse is burnt. And during that process, the stick will also be getting, the end of the stick will be burning. Finally, when everything is almost over, the whole stick is thrown into a funeral pyre and it's consumed with the funeral pyre. So that's the analogy. That stick is the self-attentiveness. We need to hold on to self-attentiveness until all other thoughts are destroyed. All other thoughts includes the one who is doing the self-investigation, the ego, is itself, it's the first thought and the root of all other thoughts. So that only when ego is destroyed does the self-attentiveness cease, because there's no need for self-attentiveness after the destruction of ego. Attention is when we rise as ego, we're aware of many things. So we have this ability to be selective in what we're aware of. So what we are selectively aware of is called attending. So we're aware of so many things, but we focus our awareness, so to speak, on one thing. That is what is called attention. So when ego is destroyed, what remains is just pure awareness. So there's no need for self-attentiveness there, because there's nothing other than ourself for us to be aware of. So all attention, just like in sleep, we don't attend to anything in sleep, because all that exists in sleep is our own being. So there's nothing else for us to be aware of. So that awareness of our being is just our very nature. So when ego is destroyed, the need for self-attentiveness comes to an end. So the effort to be self-attentive is destroyed, because what remains is just a pure self-awareness. That's why he gives that analogy of that stick. Then he goes on to actually describe the practice. He says, if other thoughts rise, and in this context, we need to understand what he means by other thoughts rise. This is the 6th paragraph of Nana. In the 4th paragraph, 2 paragraphs earlier, he said the world is nothing but thoughts. Basically, I'll just get the sentence. He says, Nine vugale tavitu, jagam endro porol anyamai ille. That is, other than thoughts, there's no such thing as the world. The world is nothing but thoughts. Just like the world we see in sleep is just a product of our own, it's a figment of our imagination. It's a mental fabrication. So likewise, this world is a mental fabrication. So all the phenomena that make up this world are nothing but mental phenomena, and mental phenomena are thoughts. So when he says here, if other thoughts rise, that means if we are aware of anything other than ourselves, what should we do? If other thoughts rise, without trying to complete them, in other words, without trying to go after these, whatever appears, it is necessary to investigate to whom they have occurred. As I explained earlier, investigating to whom it has occurred means turning our attention away from whatever has appeared back towards ourself, the one to whom it has appeared, the one in whose view it has appeared. And then in the next sentence he says, however many thoughts rise, so what? That is, we are not trying to stop the rising of thoughts. We are trying to turn our attention, whatever thought may arise, let it arise. Our concern should not be with thoughts, but with attending to ourselves. So, however many thoughts rise, so what? Vigilantly, as soon as each thought emerges, if one investigates to whom it has occurred, it will be clear to me. If one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace. Here again, I'll just interrupt the flow just to clarify one thing. Many people take this to be a two-step process. First investigating to whom, and then investigating who am I. So, but we need to think carefully about what Bhagavan means here. When Bhagavan talks about investigating to whom, what he implies by investigating to whom is turning our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourself. So investigating to whom is turning our attention to ourself. Investigating who am I means holding on to that self-attentiveness. That is, having turned our attention away from other things back towards ourselves, we then need to try to hold on to that self-attentiveness. So when he says, if one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace, what he means is, if we hold on to the self-attentiveness, the mind will subside back into what he calls its birthplace. Its birthplace means the source. That's ourself. That is, the mind rises from ourself, from our own being. So that our being is the birthplace of the mind. If we hold on to the self-attentiveness, the mind will subside back into its source. It will return to its birthplace. And then in the next sentence he says, the thought that had risen will also subside. That is, thoughts cannot rise. All thoughts arise in our awareness. So if we do not attend to them, they cannot arise. So if we fix our attention on ourselves so firmly, but we don't allow our attention to be diverted away towards anything else, no thought will be able to rise or stand. So but when we fix our attention on ourselves, hold on to that self-attentiveness, whatever had appeared will subside, it will cease, it'll go back, it'll merge back into its source along with us. And then in the next sentence, a very important sentence, he says, Ipani paraka paraka. That means when one practices and practices in this manner, for the mind, the power to stand firmly established in its birthplace increases. So in this sentence, he makes clear how important this practice is. It is only by persistent practice of turning our attention back to ourselves and holding on to the self-attentiveness as much as we can. And whenever our attention goes away, turning it back towards ourselves and holding on to the self-attentiveness, it's only by practicing and practicing in this manner, persistently practicing, that we will gain the power to remain firmly abiding in our source, in our birthplace, in the place from which we rose. So practice is absolutely necessary. There is no shortcut for practice. And that practice is not something that we can do just morning and evening when we sit for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes for meditation. This practice should be going on as much as possible throughout the day. So whatever we may be doing, we should be trying in the background to hold on to awareness of our own being. This is what he refers to indirectly he refers to this in the 11th paragraph of Nana. In one sentence he says, Oruvan tan sarupam adeyam varayal nirantara sarupa smaranaye karipatravanayan adu andre podam. That means until one attains Swarupa. Swarupa means what we actually are, our own real nature. So until one attains Swarupa, if one holds on to nirantara means uninterrupted, constant Swarupa smarana, self-remembrance, remembrance of our own being, adu andre podam, that alone is sufficient. So throughout the day, as much as possible, whatever else other activities we may be engaged in, whether we're engaged in other activities or not, we need to be trying to hold on to this self-remembrance or self-attentiveness. Obviously, self-remembrance and self-attentiveness mean the same. Bhagavan uses so many terms to refer to this practice, but they're all essentially referring to the same practice. And he defines the practice of self-investigation in the 16th paragraph as Sadakalamum manate atma-vil vetirupadu. That means always keeping the mind on oneself. In other words, always keeping our attention on ourselves. That alone is Atma-vichara. That's all we need to do. And that we need to be doing that as much as possible throughout the day. Whatever other activities we may be engaged in, we never cease to be aware I am. So we shouldn't be, we need to avoid forgetting I am. We need to be constantly remembering I am. That's what he refers to as Swarupa Smarana. Constantly remembering our own being.
And you said something over and over using different phrases, saying it in a different way, since Vishu's not here. So thinking the thought basically, who am I, which of course is the gateway to our self-inquiry, ultimately destroys all other thoughts, ultimately destroys that thought. My question is,
no. It's not
well,
it's not thinking who am I. That's what I tried to explain. When Bhagavan says the thought who am I, he's not talking about thinking who am I. The thought who am I means attending to ourself. The thought who am I is a synonym for the investigation who am I. And the investigation means attending to ourselves. Merely thinking who am I is just a thought. It's just words. Those words are not going to destroy all other thoughts. It's only the self-attentiveness that will destroy everything.
so the practice of that self-attentiveness then, isn't that in its own way perhaps a synonym for japa?
No, because well, we can metaphorically describe it. In some places, it's metaphorically described as japa. But japa, we are repeating a word, a name of God or a mantra. That is an object. What in the difference between self-investigation and all other forms of meditation, in all other forms of meditation, there's some object we're meditating on, a name, a form, whatever it may be, something we're meditating on. In self-investigation, we're not attending to any name or any form. We're attending to our own being.
Okay, and it's the idea of attending to our own being that I'm thinking of. And that's also the answer to Vishu's other question about whether or not he can do that successfully, eyes closed or eyes open.
Yeah, we are equally aware I am, whether our eyes are open or closed. In fact, I am means our being. We're aware of our being not only in waking and dream, but also in sleep. The only thing we are constantly aware of throughout all the three states is our own being. In sleep, we are aware of nothing other than our own being. In waking and dream, we're aware of our own being and we're aware of so many other things.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to return to our source, our natural state of just being, we need to attend to nothing other than our own being. Attend to that which is permanent, and everything that is impermanent will slip off. The only thing that is permanent is our own being. I am.
And Ramana says over and over again, I'll get to you in 1 second, Jacques, that this is easy to do, but you underscore it by saying, but you must be persistent, even though it might be
Persistence is absolutely necessary. It is easy, but it seems difficult because of our lack of liking to do it.
Yeah.
If you're standing on the edge of a cliff, it's very easy just to take one step forward and fall over the cliff. But it's very hard for us to take that one step because we don't want to. We know that if we step over the cliff, we're going to end up a nasty mess at the bottom. So it's our reluctance to attend to ourselves that makes it seem to be difficult.
Yeah.
As
Jacques,
Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulludunapadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Yeah. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. That is, it's ego that has expanded itself, that is seeing itself as all this. Therefore, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. Because when we investigate what ego will thereby subside. And when ego subsides, everything subsides. So we must be willing to give up everything. Total renunciation. Bhagavan would never attach much importance to the external renunciation. Changing your name, changing the color of your cloth, shaving your head or growing a long beard or whatever. That is not the real renunciation. That's all external. Bhagavan said that's according to prarabdha. Some people, their destiny is to be married. Some people, their destiny is to be a monk or a sannyasi or whatever. That's irrelevant. The real renunciation is turning our attention within and holding on to self-attentiveness, thereby letting go of everything else.
Thank you.
And if we go deep enough in this, we will thereby destroy ego. And when ego is destroyed, everything is destroyed.
If anybody else has comments, use the icon for raising your hand. Jacques, I saw your actual hand go up, so go ahead.
Michael, you're bringing up a very important point that you brought up numerous times and on your blog as well. And yet there seems to be a bit of a contradiction. And well, it's not a contradiction, but it's a distinction, let's put it that way. Sadhu Om even mentioned it, I forget where, when he says that you can be aware of second and third persons as long as you're aware of the first person. So what I'm getting at is what you just said, that the contradiction or the apparent contradiction is that you just said it again. We have to be aware of the self giving up everything else. So in that sense, we can't be aware of the background, but we're not all Swami Tines or Tine Swamis, and we don't all sit or stand or do whatever we do all day, constantly, completely immersed in the self. So
yes,
I wonder if you.
Yes, I understand your question. That is, the thing is, there are degrees of self-attentiveness. When we are practicing, we are trying to be as self-attentive as possible. The more self-attentive we are, the more our attention is thereby withdrawn from other things. But most of us are not able to withdraw our attention completely from other things. Our self-attentiveness, even when we close our eyes, is still only partial. Sadhu Om used to explain this in a very simple way, talking about turning 180 degrees. This, of course, is not literal, but it's a way of illustrating it. So if we are attending to things other than ourselves, we're facing towards the world. Our aim is to turn our attention away from the world. That means away from all phenomena, back towards ourselves, towards our own being. So it's a 180-degree turn. That's our aim. But in practice, we're only able to at first we may be able to turn 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees. We need to continue practicing as much as possible until finally we're able to turn 180 degrees. We need to turn 180 degrees only for 1 second, and that is the end of the story. Ego is destroyed. So when we're in the midst of other activities, our self-attentiveness may only be partial. Because we have to attend to other things in the course of day-to-day activities. But even when we're attending to other things, we can be holding on to a subtle self-remembrance in the background. That is, whatever else we may be doing, we're always aware of ourself. Who is doing it? I am doing it. Who is hearing it? I am hearing it. Who is seeing it? I am seeing it. So we usually overlook I, because we're so interested in whatever we're looking at. We are now when practicing self-investigation, we are trying to switch our interest away from other things back towards ourselves. So we're trying to shift our attention more and more to our own being.
We have 2 more questions here.
So Jacques, is that clear?
Yeah, I guess the more, to get really to what I'm getting at, well, it is all what you just said, but it's also like, for example, I'm listening to you now, and or the other speakers.
Yeah.
So I can do both at the same time. I can listen to you and have the background going on too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But does that, even to use a bit of a perverse example, well, perverse in the sense of it's almost two activities that shouldn't go together, but let's say I'm watching the news on TV. I should be doing that as well too.
Yes, whatever you may be doing, as much as possible. Because if you think of it, consider, for example, if you drive a car, every day you may drive to work. When driving to work, you're very familiar with the route. But though you're familiar with the route, it requires some attention, because every day the traffic will be different. The light that was green yesterday will be red today. The volume of traffic will be different, where cars are different, cars coming from different angles. So a certain amount of attention is required for driving. But actually, it's very little attention. If you're an experienced driver, driving almost goes on autopilot. So when you reach your workplace, if someone asks you at such and such a stop where the light's red, you probably won't be able to say. Because certainly when the lights were red, you stopped, but you don't register it in your memory, because your mind would have been on other things. You'd have been thinking of other things. So the minimum attention that was required for driving, you devote to that. But in the meanwhile, you're thinking about other things. You're thinking about what you have to do at the office today, what problems there are in the office, what problems there are at home, how you're going to pay the bills, this, that. So many thoughts will be going through the mind. If we think of it, throughout the day, we think so many thoughts about so many things. But how many of the thoughts that we think are actually necessary at that moment? Most of the thoughts we think are not necessary. So if Sadhu Om used to say, 99% of the thoughts we think are unnecessary thoughts. If we replace those 99% of unnecessary thoughts with self-attentiveness, we'll very, very quickly reach our goal.
Yeah, even scientifically, they came up with a study they did on that like something like 85% of our thoughts in one day are the same 20 thoughts that we repeat endlessly over and over.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
If 99% are unnecessary, it makes you wonder which 1% are necessary every day.
Well, leave that, even that problem, leave to Bhagavan.
Yeah. Thank you.
We need to attend to ourselves as much as possible. Everything else will be taken care of.
I like the sound of that. Bruce, what's your question or comment?
Yeah, I think it might be clarifying. It was something I heard recently. The difference between a home and a prison is the home has the lock on the inside and a prison has the lock on the outside. So if our attention is towards the outside, we have the feeling that we can't let ourselves be free. We're delegating the lock mechanism to the outside world. Whereas if we find ourselves more comfortable in the home of ourself, I think that the lock is on the inside, so we can go about our daily activities. At the same time, our attention isn't, pulled outward. I don't know if it's kind of related to the three-wall prison.
Yeah, it is. That is, the more we attend to things other than ourselves, the more we are tying ourselves up in bondage. So that is like the lock being outside. But the more we attend to ourselves, the more freedom we are finding, the more we are freeing ourselves from that bondage. And finally, we understand that the lock was never outside. It was always in the bondage we are in is entirely self-created bondage. Like Bhagavan said, it's like a person standing on the ground and holding a branch, saying, "Oh, I have to hold on to this branch, or I won't, or I'll fall." We're already standing on solid ground. The bondage we are in is the world is not binding us. The body is not binding us. We are holding on to the body and world and saying, "Oh, I'm bound." And the more we hold on, the more we seem to be helplessly bound. But all we need to see is that we don't, the bondage is not, nothing is binding us. We are binding ourselves to the body and world. We are the one who is clinging. Nothing is clinging to us. We are actually eternally free, but we seem to be in bondage because of our clinging.
Okay. Mickey, unmute yourself. You're next.
I've heard it described as being likened to a donut in the hole. And we tend to hang on to identifying with the donut. Yet the donut comes and goes. The hole always remains.
Yes, yes. But the hole is space. The donut is in the hole, not the hole in the donut. That is, the entire world exists in us. We don't exist, but we think that we exist in the world because we identify ourselves with this little body, a tiny, insignificant thing in this vast universe. So we seem to be in the world, though in fact the whole world is inside us. In a dream, we seem to be in a world, but that entire dream world is in us. In exactly the same way, this entire world is only in us.
And that pertains to everything. I can be walking along the sidewalk trying to be in stillness, and I remind myself that my thoughts that are interrupting my stillness are all ego, each and every one of them. And then I remind myself that thought that they're ego is also ego.
Yes, it's all a product of ego, but ego is not any of the thoughts. Ego is that in whose view all those thoughts appear. That is, those thoughts are nothing other than ego, but ego is something other than those thoughts. Yeah. Because the thoughts are objects, ego is the subject.
Are you ready for the second question, Michael?
Yes.
There's two of them. Do you want me to read them together or
let's do
separately?
one by one.
One by one.
They're related, but I think it's easiest to deal with one by one.
Okay. So when you're done, I'll read you the second one
Yes.
then. This is from John. He says, since human consciousness can be simultaneously aware of several things at once, is it sufficient to keep one part of awareness on the I thought, while also watching a video or reading or driving a car, as you talked about, or having a conversation? When I do this, he says, excuse me, it feels that I am more present for the other things and more alert. Is this helpful on the path?
Yes, this is what I was saying in answer to Jacques' question. That is, if we analyze very deeply, we're actually only able to be aware of one thing at a time. But because our attention is so rapidly darting between one thing and another, we seem to be able to be aware of several things at once. So what our aim in self-investigation is to be as self-attentive as possible. So doesn't matter what is going on, whether we're watching a video, reading, driving a car, or anything. Some things require a little bit more attention, other things require less attention. If we're really interested in attending to well, if we're watching a video, for example, watching a video is generally an unnecessary activity. So many unnecessary activities we have. Supposing we're just watching a something for entertainment, a Hollywood film or something, or on a video. It's unnecessary to watch that. We're not getting any benefit either for our spiritual welfare or for material welfare. Watching for it's just passing the time. So at such times we should try to be more self-attentive. For politeness, because others want us to watch the video with them, they say, okay, I'll sit and watch the video. But our attention should be almost entirely on ourselves, even while pretending to watch the video. Other things we may be, like if you're driving a car, obviously driving a car does need a certain amount of attention. But because we're so accustomed to driving a car, it almost happens on autopilot. So when we're driving a car, usually, as I say, we are thinking so many other unnecessary thoughts. They are not thinking those other thoughts is not distracting us from driving the car. If our mind is very, very much engrossed in other thoughts, then we may get distracted from the driving. But generally, we give enough attention to the driving, but most of our attention is on the other thoughts. So instead of attending to the unnecessary thoughts, we can be attending to the one to whom all those unnecessary thoughts appear. So it is possible in the midst of other activities to be self-attentive to a greater or lesser extent. What extent is appropriate depends a little bit upon the activity. Because certain, like if we are driving a car, we obviously have a certain responsibility to drive carefully. So some attention it seems to need, at least at first. But we shouldn't even be thinking in terms of attending to ourselves. I can watch a video and attend to myself. Why to watch the video? Attend to yourself. That is, we need to be, if we are really interested in this self-attentiveness, our other activities will be slowly dropping off. We'll lose interest in these things. We'll lose interest in watching videos, in reading, in so many, obviously we all have to converse sometimes with people, but we will, our conversations, we will lose interest in most conversations, because a lot of conversations are just social pastime, socializing with people. These things we will find we have less and less interest in these things. It may be our destiny to be in a certain situation where we have to socialize with people and everything. That's okay, but inwardly we are less and less concerned about these things. Our interest should, that is, this process of going deeper in self-investigation is turning our interest away from all other things back towards ourselves. So if we are really seriously practicing self-attentiveness, our interest in other things will be dropping off. Doesn't necessarily mean that our activities will reduce, but in many cases it may seem to result in a reduction in other activities, because we'll be less interested in going down to the pub for a drink, or going to play darts, or going to watch a football match, or watch cricket, or whatever it is. All these sort of activities that may have interested us in the past will become less and less interesting for us, because we are getting, as we become more and more interested in knowing who am I, the interest in other things will naturally drop off. But if this is a process, if this is we are weaning our mind off its interest, its liking to attend to other things. So it's a gradual process. So we shouldn't expect that all of a sudden all interest in other things will completely subside, and we need not even try to push away the interest in other things. What we need to do is cultivate more and more interest in attending to ourselves. If our interest in attending to ourselves increases, the interest in other things will naturally wane. So we're not trying to push away anything, we're trying to hold on to ourselves. If we hold on to ourselves, other things will drop off.
So you really have to pay less and less attention to what others may think of you, for they could easily judge you as being antisocial if you
Yeah,
turn
yeah. I
on.
mean, sometimes it'll happen, but I mean, people usually get used to it. People just, he's an eccentric, he likes to be by himself or whatever. So we shouldn't be too concerned about what other people think. Of course, we need to be kind, considerate, and everything to other people, but we are not in this world to just to please others.
Yeah.
We're not here for being one of the lads or one of the girls, or having social network of friends and all these things. These things may be there, but we'll be less and less concerned about these things.
I see that with increasing clarity. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Second question.
Yes.
The second question from John: in times dedicated to the practice of putting all attention on the I, this is harder as the mind isn't occupied by any other activities and is trained to put awareness on an object. Putting full attention on the I, there is no object to be found and nothing to focus on, he says. There is a pause that doesn't last long, then an awareness of something such as a mental thought or an awareness of my breathing, and I repeat the process. Question: is this on the path? Any suggestions?
Okay, before answering this, I'll just point out an interesting thing. Vishu's question, Vishu was saying, it's easier to practice self-attentiveness when his eyes are closed. When he's engaged in other activities, he's not able to do so. John seems to be saying the opposite. John says when he's engaged in other activities, he's able to attend to himself, but when he has to, but when he's in times dedicated to the practice of putting all attention on I, he says it's harder. We need to strike a balance between these two. We need to recognize that attending to I, it doesn't matter what other things we are doing. We are able to attend to ourselves whether other activities are going on or not. In the case of what John is saying here, I think John, that is, many people think they are attending to themselves more than they're actually doing so. So if we're watching a video and attending to I, for example, the chances are most of our attention is going to be on the video. Because why do we watch videos? Because videos it's got an interesting story, or, well, I mean, there are different types of videos. Some are dramas, some are maybe discourses on Vedanta or whatever it may be. It's something that interests us. That's why we watch videos. So if we're interested in something other than ourselves, we're going to be less interested in attending to ourselves. So we need to strike a balance. We need to recognize that we can always attend to ourselves. But to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we will not be attending to other things. So, whereas in the case of Vishu, who said he's able to practice self-attentiveness with his eyes closed, but he can't do so when his eyes are open, that indicates that he's not actually practicing self-attentiveness even when his eyes are closed. Because if he were really able to attend to himself with his eyes closed, he would find it equally easy to attend to himself when his eyes are open. Likewise with John, if he were really able to hold on to self-attentiveness in the midst of other activities, he would also be able to hold on to self-attentiveness when when the mind isn't occupied by other activities. So the fact that John says he's able to hold on to self-attentiveness in midst of other activities, but not, he finds it more difficult to do so. It's harder to do so when he's not engaged in other activities, indicates that he's not really holding on to self-attentiveness even in the midst of other activities. He also says, putting full attention on the I, there is no object to be found and nothing to focus on. in the case of attending to I is not an object. I is the subject. Well, initially we can say I is the subject, but actually if we go deeper, I is not even the subject. I is the reality underlying the subject, because the subject is ego. And ego is the adjunct conflated awareness I. That is, it's I mixed and conflated with adjuncts. It's I am this body. I am John. I am Michael. I am Vishu. I am Jacques. I am whoever. So what we identify with, the person, Michael or John or Jacques or Ted or Vishu or whoever, that person is an object. But what we are attending to is not what we take ourselves to be, but what we actually are, which is the awareness I. So the awareness I is not an object, but it is also not correct to say there's nothing to focus on, because we are not nothing. We are something. We are that thing in whose view all other things seem to exist. So we are the one fundamental thing. We are the base thing, which is awareness. And we should never think of awareness as being nothing. It's not an object. It's not a phenomenon. But it's the one thing, it's the space in which all objects and phenomena appear. So there is something to focus on. If we think there's nothing to focus on, then we're not practicing self-attentiveness, because practicing self-attentiveness means focusing on ourselves, on our own being, on this fundamental awareness I am. We need to, in order to practice self-investigation correctly, we need to understand what actually self-attentiveness is. It's not attending to nothing. It's also not attending to any object. It's attending to that to which all thoughts about objects and nothing, all appear to something that is aware. What is it that is aware of all this? I is that which is aware of everything else. So we are trying to attend not to any object, but to the subject, that to which all objects appear. And then he goes and says there is a pause that doesn't last long, then an awareness of something such as a mental thought or awareness of my breathing, and I repeat the process. When he says he repeats the process, what is the process he's actually doing? I mean, I don't know if John is here, but the process is attending to our own being, attending to I. He refers to it as, in the previous question, he referred to it as keeping awareness on the I thought. We don't even have to think of it in terms of I thought means ego. But we don't even have to drop the thought bit, just to hold on to I. Let's not label it as, for example, if we are walking with Bhagavan on a dark path and we see something lying on the path ahead of us, to us it looks like a snake. And we're afraid. And we say, oh, Bhagavan, there's a snake there. Bhagavan assures us, no, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. But Bhagavan knows that his merely saying so is not sufficient. We need to see for ourselves that it's a rope. So he says, it's just a rope. Look at it carefully. But Bhagavan, how can I look at it carefully? It's a snake. Why should we label it as a snake? Why should we label it either as a snake or as a rope? He said, look at it carefully. So if we look at it carefully, then we will see what it actually is. So there is actually no such thing as I thought, ego. Though Bhagavan talks of that, ego is that to which all other things appear. But if we investigate this ego, we find there's no such thing as ego at all. That is, we seem to be ego only so long as we're aware of other things. We seem to be the subject so long as we're aware of objects. But when we turn our attention away from all objects back towards the subject itself dissolves, and the pure being awareness, the underlying reality of the subject, the pure I alone remains. So rather than thinking in terms of attending to the I thought, just think in terms of attending to I. I'm attending to myself. Who am I? Focus our attention on our I. So let's not label it as I thought. That's not very helpful. We may experience it as a thought, as ego, but putting that label on it is not helpful. What we are to attend to is ourself. It is Atma-vichara. Atma-vichara, Atma means oneself. So we're attending to what we actually are, or at least we're trying to attend to what we actually are, which is not any object, not any form, not any phenomenon, but that in which all these things appear and disappear. Everything else is impermanent. It appears and disappears. The world appears and disappears. It appears in waking state. It disappears in dreams. Some other world appears in its place, and in sleep, no world appears. Likewise with the body. Now this body is appearing. In dream, it doesn't appear. Some other body appears, and in sleep, no body at all appears. But the one thing that is constant, and it's in all these three states, is our own being, I am. So that is what we need to attend to. And that is not nothing. That is the one real thing.
That is
what
nothing.
we actually are.
Yeah. Michael, your clarity is greatly appreciated, and I, for one, enjoy hearing your explanations over and over again, because it takes a lot to penetrate to where I really...
This is actually extremely simple. What Bhagavan has taught is it's very, very simple, but it's also deep and subtle. So we need to have a subtle understanding to understand what Bhagavan is talking about. So we need to firstly pay close attention to what Bhagavan is saying, and we need to then think about it to make sense of it, to understand it. We need to be sure that we've understood correctly, because if we haven't understood correctly, how can we practice it correctly?
Yeah. Sandra's here, and she has an interesting question, and she's next. And the question is, quoting from Maharshi's Gospel, if the word can produce effect, judge for yourself how much more powerful must be the preaching through silence. But people do not understand this simple, bare truth. He says, the truth of their everyday, ever-present, eternal experience. Bhagavan's reference, this is from Sandra, Bhagavan's reference to the simple, bare truth as the everyday, ever-present, eternal silence is quite easy to understand versus concepts, parentheses, words that produce effects, which take us deeper into the mind and out of silence. Can you speak about this, Michael?
I'll first speak about this passage from Maharshi's Gospel, because we need to understand this passage in context. Wait a second, here it is. This is in the second chapter of Maharshi's Gospel. This is the final question and answer in that chapter. But it's important that is when Bhagavan replies, he's replying to a question. So understanding what the question is very important, very relevant to understanding his answer. So the question he was asked is, why does not Bhagavan go about and preach the truth to people at large? So the person who's asking this question expects Bhagavan to go out and preach to the world, basically. And Bhagavan's reply is, how do you know I'm not doing it? Does preaching consist in mounting a platform and haranguing people around? Preaching is simple communication of knowledge. By the way, this word preaching, remember, this isn't Bhagavan's own word. It's the word used by the questioner. So Bhagavan is replying to the question. Bhagavan wouldn't normally talk about preaching, but in this context, that's why he's using the word preaching. Preaching is simple communication of knowledge. It can really be done in silence only. What do you think of a man who listens to a sermon for an hour and goes away without having been impressed by it so as to change his life? That is, in India, pravachana's, discourses on the Bhagavad Gita, discourses on this Puranic text, that Puranic text, all these things are very, very popular. People go in masses to hear these discourses on all these various scriptures. But even though they listen to these things, do they actually, how much impact does it make on them? Does it actually make them change their life? That's what Bhagavan is asking here. So that's why he asked, what do you think of a man who listens to a sermon for an hour and goes away without having been impressed by it so as to change his life? Bhagavan asked that because this is so common. Compare him with another who sits in a holy presence and goes away after some time with his outlook on life totally changed. Which is better, to preach loudly without effect, or to sit silently, sending out inner force? Some of the wording here, because Bhagavan would have spoken in Tamil, this has been recorded in English. I don't know that Bhagavan would have said it in quite this way of sitting silently, sending out inner force. That doesn't seem quite right. That is just, Bhagavan isn't consciously teaching through silence. He's not consciously sending out some force. He's just being as he is. By his being as he is, that has its own power. That is what it means. So it sounds a bit more like there's more, sitting silently, sending out in a force implies some sense of doership, but there's no doership there. Bhagavan is not doing anything, he's just being as he is. But by his being as he is, that itself has its own power. Sorry, I'm commenting on it as I go on reading it. And then he goes on to say, this is a very nice explanation he gives here. Again, how does speech arise? There is abstract knowledge. Again, here, I don't know whether Bhagavan would, I think what Bhagavan would have meant by abstract knowledge, that is in Tamil, the words arivu and unavu mean both knowledge and awareness. So I think he's referring, what's translated here as abstract knowledge, he would have talked about as there's pure awareness. From that ego arises the ego, which in turn gives rise to thought, and thought to the spoken word. So the word is the great grandson of the original source. The original source is the pure awareness, which is pure being, which is silence, is the implication. If the word can produce effect, judge for yourself how much more powerful must be preaching through silence. I suspect Bhagavan wouldn't have actually said it in quite that way. How much more powerful is silence? Because silence is, though in the context of a question, Bhagavan spoke about preaching through silence, silence is not actually preaching, it is just being. But the thing is, Bhagavan says something, but Bhagavan speaks in a very precise and very subtle way. People get a general impression and they record it. And as I say, Bhagavan would have answered in Tamil. This has been, someone would have translated it and someone else would have recorded it. So it's not exact. We can't take this to be Bhagavan's exact words, but we need to get the general impression of what Bhagavan would have said. So this is the portion that Sandra quoted. If the word can produce effect, judge for yourself how much more powerful must be the preaching through silence. So to understand this statement, we need to understand what he explained before. From pure awareness arises ego. From ego arises thoughts, and out of a thought comes speech. So speech is the great grandson of the pure awareness. That pure awareness is silence. That is pure being, which is pure silence. But people do not understand this simple, bare truth, the truth of their everyday, ever-present, eternal experience. This truth is the truth of the self. That is, it's the truth of just being, of what we actually are. Is there anyone unaware of the self? Again, Bhagavan, there's no word in Tamil for the self. But probably the word he would have used would have been Swarupa. Swarupa means the literal meaning of Swarupa is own form. That means what we actually are, our real nature, what we actually are. So this truth is the truth of what we actually are. Is there anyone who is unaware of what they actually are? We're all aware of our own being. We mistake ourselves to be something else, but we never, that is, we are aware that we are, even though we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. But they do not even like to hear of this truth, whereas they're eager to know about what lies beyond, about heaven and hell and reincarnation. Because they love mystery and not the truth, religions cater to them so as to eventually bring them round to the self. Whatever be the means adopted, you must at last return to the self. So why not abide in the self here and now? To be a spectator of or to speculate about the other world, oneself is necessary. Therefore, they are not different from oneself. That all this idea about heaven and hell and all the whatever whatever religious or philosophical or scientific beliefs we may have, we have to be there to have that belief. So ultimately, all these depend upon ourselves. That's what Bhagavan is saying here. Therefore, they're not different from oneself. The word there is put there is the self, but that's a little bit misleading way of putting it. Bhagavan is talking about ourself. So they're not different from ourselves. Even the ignorant man who, when he sees objects, sees only himself. That is, we are seeing ourselves as all this world. So this is what Bhagavan actually said. So the context in which Bhagavan is saying it, Bhagavan doesn't say words are useless. What he says is silence is much more powerful than words. And the words he's talking about people who go and give religious discourses or philosophical discourses. These will have, there's so many people who give discourses and say you must live a good life, you must be honest, you must give in charity, you must do this, you must do that. But people go and listen to that, and then they go back to their business and they try and cheat and get more money. And so it's worldly people who they may be engaged in so many unrighteous activities, but they think that if they go to a temple, if they go to listen to a holy discourse, if they go to a church or a mosque or a synagogue or a gurudwara or whatever, that will wash away all the sins of all that's what Bhagavan is talking about here when he says it doesn't produce a word. Bhagavan isn't saying words cannot produce an effect. If words couldn't produce an effect, then why has he given us teachings in words? Why did he even appear in human name and form? For silence, we don't need a name and form. Silence is our own being. The reason our own being, our own reality, has appeared outwardly in the form of Bhagavan and given us these teachings is because we are not able to understand silence. Sandra says, it's quite easy to understand silence. No, it is not. If we understood silence, silence is not something to understand. Silence is not conceptual. Silence is something, we can know silence only by being silence. Silence is what Bhagavan is talking about when he talks about eternal silence is the silence of our own being. What is ever present, eternal experience, the experience I am, that is the silence. So in order to understand that, we need to be that. It's not like understanding concepts. Bhagavan has given us teachings in words. Those words are what he's teaching us through words are concepts. So, which Sandra says, concepts take us deeper into the mind and out of silence. Not necessarily. It depends which concepts. The wrong concepts will take us outwards. The correct concepts, as expressed in Bhagavan's teachings, will direct our attention back within, and silence is to be found only within, not outside. So we shouldn't dismiss concepts. Concepts have, the ultimate truth is not conceptual, it's beyond the mind. But we have to start from where we are. Now we are identified with the mind. We are living in a world, in a mental world, and the whole of this world is nothing but a mind-created world. We have so many concepts, so many ideas, so many beliefs about so many things. What Bhagavan's teachings are concepts, but firstly, they're very simple concepts, and they're concepts that will undermine all our other concepts. Like we've got so many beliefs. We believe ourselves, that before we come to Bhagavan, before we learn about these teachings, we take ourselves to be a person. Even now we experience ourselves as a person, but at least we have an understanding after studying Bhagavan, but we are not the person that we seem to be. But we still seem to be this person. It seems to us that this world is real. We understand from Bhagavan's teaching that this world is just a mental fabrication. But in spite of our understanding that at a certain level, conceptually we understand it, but it still seems to be real. So the concepts Bhagavan teaches us through his teachings are concepts that are going to direct our attention back towards ourselves. So we shouldn't just dismiss all concepts. A lot of, that is 99% of concepts take our mind outwards. But the concepts that Bhagavan teaches us, the principles of his teachings, are very, very valuable concepts if our aim is to know what we actually are. So Bhagavan is not opposed to concepts. Otherwise, why did he write Uludunapti? Why did he write Nana? Why did he write so many other works? He wrote these to give us clear teachings for us to put into practice. And the practice these teachings are all pointing at is not about going out towards the world, but going in towards our own being. And our own being alone is silence. So Bhagavan is teaching in silence, not by doing anything, but by just being as he is. In order for us to understand the silence, the Bhagavan's silent teaching, we need to be as we actually are. And in order to be as we actually are, we need to follow the pointers that he has given us in his teachings. We need to apply the concepts that he has taught us through his verbal teachings. So just to illustrate what I mean by this, in Arunachaksharamlai, in one verse, I think verse 43 or 44, I can't remember the number, Bhagavan reveals what Arunachala taught him in silence. That is, in the previous verse, Bhagavan prayed, Tane tane tattvamidane tane kartavaya Arunachala. That means oneself alone is the reality. Reveal this to me yourself. Show me this yourself. So that's Bhagavan's prayer. And in the next verse, he gives what is Arunachala's answer. The answer given by Arunachala is, Tirumbiyaham tane dinamahakankan teriyum endranayen Arunachala. So Arunachala's reply is, turning within, see yourself with the inner eye. It will be known. It will be known means what Bhagavan asked for in the previous verse, showing that oneself alone is the reality. That will be known if you turn your attention within and see yourself with the inner eye. So how did Arunachala say that to Bhagavan? Arunachala is in the form of a hill. So Arunachala didn't express that in words. That is what Arunachala taught in silence. So Bhagavan is, in that verse, Bhagavan is translating the silent teaching into words. What Arunachala taught him in silence, he is revealing to us in words. So Bhagavan, this applies to all of Bhagavan's teachings. Bhagavan is what he is eternally teaching us in silence. Because our minds are outward going, we are not able to understand that silent teaching. Because we can understand the silent teaching only by being as we are. So he has come outside and expressed the same teaching in words. Of course, the words can never capture what is conveyed by the silence, but they point us in the right direction. In order to understand what he is eternally teaching us through silence, we need to be silent. That means we need to be as we actually are without rising as ego. But how to be as we actually are, that is what his teachings are showing us. So we shouldn't dismiss Bhagavan's verbal teachings as unimportant. We shouldn't dismiss the concepts he teaches us as mere concepts that are going to take us deeper in mind. That's a misunderstanding. The teaching in words is very necessary so long as our mind is still outward going. And for all of us, our mind is still outward going if we're honest with ourselves. So, but what his teaching in words is pointing at us is they're pointing our attention back within. If we turn our attention back within, we will thereby subside back into our own being, and thereby we will be as we actually are. Being as we actually are, that is silence. Sandra, if you're here, is that a clear answer to your question?
Thank you. Yes, it is, Michael, with all humility. Yes. And thank you for explaining that. I really appreciate it.
Yes, yes. People often, people say, I've heard people saying, oh, Bhagavan's real teaching isn't self-inquiry. That's only a secondary teaching he gave. Bhagavan's real teaching is silence. What does that even mean? What he's teaching through silence is self-inquiry. That is, self-inquiry or self-investigation means turning our attention back to our own being and thereby being as we actually are. That is silence. So there's no, it's not that there's a higher grade teaching silence and a lower grade teaching self-investigation. Self-investigation is the means by which we experience the silence, but is our own being, but is what we always actually are.
Yes, I think I was taking silence to be a concept.
Yes, yeah, of course. For us, silence is nothing but a concept. Even when we talk about our being, it's all a concept, because we don't know ourselves as we actually are. But though we don't know ourselves as we actually are, that doesn't mean we don't know ourselves. We know ourselves, but we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. So we need to investigate ourselves to find out what we actually are. That is the way to go beyond all concepts. So the concepts of Bhagavan's teachings are showing us the way to go beyond all concepts.
Thank you,
Sandra.
Michael. Thank you.
Yeah,
Very good.
right.
And we have a couple of people lined up for additional questions to Sandra's question. Sandra, thank you for it. I know you hesitated at first about it. Liana, you're next, and then after you, Bruce.
Yes, hi, thank you. Michael, was it Ramana Maharshi which just came up, who also said that after silence, I think it's like a second and third degree is eye contact, and then it's through touch also. Was it Ramana Maharshi?
That's a slightly different thing. That is, there is traditionally in some in many sampradayas, many religious traditions in India, diksha means initiation, is considered as very necessary. So if you go and join, for example, if you want to, there's so many, I mean, Hinduism is not a single religion. It's a whole family of religions. So within Hinduism, there are so many sampradayas. That means so many religious traditions. And if you want to become a part of a religious tradition, almost all religious traditions will initiate you. They may give you a mantra or something. So initiation is said to be by thought, sight, or touch. I mean, initiation is also, there's also mantra diksha, giving initiation by mantra, but there's also this idea, but there are three types of initiation. A guru can initiate a disciple either by thinking of him, or by seeing him, or by touching him. When I say him, I'm not talking about gender, him or her, it's all the same. So the guru can initiate by thought, sight, or touch. And Bhagavan refers to this in one verse in Aksharamlai. Nokie karadime takie pakavum arkaniya daralav. Mature me by your thought, by your sight, and by your touch. That's basically what that verse means. So Bhagavan is referring to that tradition. But in some contexts, when talking about this different types of initiation, Bhagavan said the highest initiation is not even initiation. I mean, generally, initiation by touch is physical. Initiation by sight is something more subtle. Initiation by thought is still more subtle. But so initiation by thought is generally considered to be the highest type of initiation. But Bhagavan said the highest initiation of all is initiation by silence. Bhagavan is ever in the state of silence. So Bhagavan never gave any formal diksha, any formal initiation. He said in all this, he said the very fact that you've come to this, you've been drawn to this path. Bhagavan didn't generally speak in English, but he knew English, and he would sometimes use English words. So though the word in Sanskrit and used in most Indian languages is diksha, the English equivalent is initiation. Initiation means to start. So Bhagavan, using that word initiation, said the very fact that you've come to this path means you've already started. So why you need any further initiation? And he said the highest initiation is the initiation in silence. Since he is ever in silence, he is eternally initiating all of us in silence. So we need not hanker for any other type of initiation. Bhagavan is the eternal guru, ever teaching us through silence. Because we are too thick-headed, our minds are too gross and outward going to understand his silent teaching. He has graciously appeared in human name and form in our time to give us these teachings in words.
Okay,
but even when he gives us the teaching in words, his real teaching is eternally silent. And silence is not a doing, silence is just being. So just by being as he is eternally teaching us, eternally initiating us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Leonie?
Thank you.
Okay.
So his silence is his grace. And his grace does everything without doing anything.
Bruce has got a question for you.
Yeah. In relation to verse 32 of Ulladu Narpadu, when the Vedas proclaim that is you instead of oneself being as one is by knowing oneself, by investigating what am I, thinking I am that Brahman. It just, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
Let read the translation. When Vedas proclaim that you are, that's like the thunderclap, scares the hell out of you, right?
Yeah.
And then it cracks the outer shell, let's call it, of, 'of, of, 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 body identification, and we're beginning to then we begin the process of self-inquiry of what we are. And, you know, that initial crack is important, but the guru is the one who is really, you know, holding our hand in a sense and guiding us inward.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm not sure that's such a useful way of thinking of it. That is, the Vedas are, the Vedas there refers to, the Vedas are a vast corpus of work, but the heart of the Vedas is the Upanishads. So in the Upanishads, but the Vedanta, the philosophical conclusion of the Vedas, are revealed in Vedanta. So it's in Vedanta, in the Upanishads, but it is said you are that. The reason why the Upanishads say you are that is that, and so whatever the Vedas are believed to be revealed knowledge. There's supposedly no human author of the Vedas. They were heard by the rishis. That is, that's why they're called Shruti, what has been heard. So the rishis heard it in their meditation. But ultimately, what is the source of all this knowledge? The source of all this knowledge comes from Guru. So Bhagavan is the source of the Vedas. So when he says, when the Vedas proclaim you are that, he's not referring to them as something other than himself. Bhagavan will never say it in such words, but if we understand Bhagavan, what Bhagavan actually is, Bhagavan is the source of the Vedas. As he says in the 12th paragraph of Nana, Kadavalam Guruvum Unmail Der Allah. God and Guru are in truth not other. So
but that's also why
he is the eternal reality, the source of everything. So why did he teach us you are that? Through the Vedas, through the Upanishads, he taught us you are that. When we rise as ego, we all desire happiness. Our real nature is infinite happiness. When we rise as ego, we limit ourselves to the extent of a body. So because we have limited ourselves, we are unable to experience the infinite happiness that is our own real nature. So we've limited our own real nature, the extent of this body. So our happiness seems to depend on things other than ourselves. And we seem to be lacking happiness. So since happiness is lacking in ourselves, we naturally assume happiness lies outside ourselves. So if I have this, I'll be happy. If I have that, I'll be happy. We are constantly seeking happiness outside ourselves. So we first seek happiness in the material things of the world. We are dissatisfied. Then we begin to look for happiness in religious pursuits. We think God can give us happiness. So we begin to worship God or whatever. But we still take God to be something other than ourselves, something outside ourselves. So the Vedas say, you yourself are that. That we need to stop looking for God outside ourselves and understand that God is our own reality. That is why they say you are that. If we understand what the Vedas are saying, but you yourself are that Brahman or God or whatever you want to call it, that is your own reality. How should we meditate on God? How should we meditate on Brahman? We should meditate on ourselves alone. Because there's no God or Brahman other than ourselves. So the aim of the Bhagavad, such as you are that, is to turn our attention towards ourselves. What we are seeking outside us is our own reality. So we need to turn back within. That's why he says, when the Vedas proclaim you are that, instead of knowing and being oneself by investigating who am I, he doesn't say investigate. He said, as he simply says, as what? It implies by investigating what am I. If I am that, then what am I? That is the implication. But it's a poetry, the adu means that, adu means what. We use it in the next line, so the two lines are matching, so it's useful poetry, but it's very deep in meaning. So when the Vedas say you are that, What should their response be? It should be to investigate that and what am I? And by investigating what am I, we thereby know ourselves, be what we actually are. Instead of that, thinking I am that Brahman, I am not this body, it may be an aid, but is it the vichara? No, it's not.
Right, but that's also the point that I'm trying to indicate, is that when the Vedas say, so they are, it means it's a pronunciation, it's an outward
Yeah,
pronunciation, and then
yeah,
the
definitely.
verse itself is saying, turn to inquiry, turn inward.
Yeah.
In inquiry, and that is the, that is vichara.
Absolutely. But that is, for the vast majority of us, teaching through words is necessary in order to understand the path. In certain cases, like Bhagavan, Bhagavan says he was taught all this by Arunachala, and Arunachala was obviously teaching in silence. Bhagavan didn't have an external guru. He didn't receive any teachings in words in this lifetime. But Bhagavan also made it very clear that he had been through all what we are going through. Everyone has to go through. So in the sense that, of course, Bhagavan is the eternal guru, but outwardly, there's the story of his life. He was born as a 16-year-old boy. That 16-year-old boy he was born as a boy, and as a child he was just outwardly like any other child, but inwardly he was a highly mature soul. He was a pakva. He was a tivra-adhikari. He was very had that intense qualification for this path. So it was very easy for him. When that fear of death came, his attention turned within and he attained it. But Bhagavan said this was all a resumption of what had gone on previous lives. But actually, with that death experience, that was the end of one story. It was the end of that story of that jiva who had gone through all this through so many lives, and this was the last life. That jiva was exterminated, was finished at that moment. What then took over the body and mind of Bhagavan, that is the eternal guru. That is what we refer to as Bhagavan. Bhagavan is not just the body. When the ego was destroyed, what remains shining in that body is our own reality. That is Bhagavan. That is Brahman. That is God. That is Guru.
I still think the way you spoke about Arunachala, I do. It was his guru.
Yeah,
and it was himself. It was himself.
Yeah, Arunachala is his guru. That is, as far as an outward form of guru is concerned, Arunachala is his guru. Certainly, right. Yes. He's explicit in Aksharamlai. Kutramutraritane Gunamai Panital Guru Vuru Viole Arunachala. Arunachala who shine as the form of guru, completely destroying my defects and making me one of all good qualities, take charge of me. So he's explicit there, but Arunachala is his guru. But Arunachala is not, though Arunachala appears in that form of that mountain, Arunachala is not just that mountain. Arunachala is our own reality.
Right. It's also that in that same verse, the verse 32, inquiry and remaining in that state.
Yes. There's no.
The fact that he lived in that state on the mountain for, from 15 to the day that he died when he was, he never left Arunachala. There was no leaving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can. There is tattva, there is significance to everything that happened in Bhagavan's lifetime. So he's coming to Arunachala, never leaving Arunachala. That is all. The tattva of that is our returning to our source and being and remaining there, being
Yeah,
without rising.
I think the example is so. I mean, you can't even say it's so valuable. I mean, that is ridiculous to put it on that small of a scale. But
yeah.
But yeah, his embodied example, if you want to call it, gives us all that hope.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Bruce. Just about a minute ago, maybe two, Michael, you said something that I've heard before many times, that Ramana simply did not have any outward teachers. And as a teenager, in his middle teen years, he became fully awakened, fully self-realized. It begs the question, why would there have been the need for any teachers from that point forward?
There was no need for any teacher from that. That is, he says in the first verse of Ashtakam, from the very young age, before knowing anything else, Arunachala was shining in his mind as something very great. So Arunachala was already doing its work before that.
And so, since then,
after that, he came to Arunachala. But we need to understand that is Bhagavan and Arunachala. That is, Arunachala is Bhagavan in hill form, and Bhagavan is Arunachala in human form. So, but these two forms, the reality behind both these forms is the reality of ourself. He is our own Swarupa, our own reality, what we actually are. So his outward life is, in our view, he has that outward life, but he appeared outwardly in our view in order to tell us to turn within, to find the real Guru that is ever shining in our heart. That is, the real Guru that is ever shining in our heart appeared outwardly in the form of Bhagavan to turn us within towards itself.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I want to know if anybody's got a question about this or anything else, since we have Michael for another several minutes, that they would like to ask a brief question about. And I'll pause and wait if somebody has one on their mind to express.
Michael, in your on your blog, you have, well, maybe one of your most interesting, it's almost a book in itself. It's 50 bullet points on the ego as the sole cause of the will. And I've read that thing over, especially the first 20 points over several times, on free will. And I know this is an endless subject, and from time immemorial, philosophers and religious, there's all these points of view. It's extremely contentious. But sometimes I wonder if the whole question is just not moot, in the sense that if, like you explained, like each have their respective silos, if you will, I forget the exact wording you use, fate and free will, or karma and free will. And I'm just wondering, when you say free will, when you go on in your blog, and you mentioned it actually in the last time with Shalini in the Padigam, the fourth verse of Sri Arunachala Padigam, talking about free will. Do you just mean basically then that it's the thought? Like, to say I have free will, it's sort of like, I'll give an example.
Jock, I have to interrupt you. We only have 3 minutes left. So let's see, Michael.
Okay. Well, I'll just end it with this example. I'm going to go up to the 15th floor of a building. I have the free will to dive off the balcony, and I have that free will, okay? But isn't the question moot? I mean, it's useless. I mean, I can have the free will to do that, or to have that ID, but it's like...
That is this whole thing about free will. Firstly, I prefer not to use the term free will, because the term free will is a very misunderstood and misused term. When we talk about free will, are we talking about will, or are we talking about freedom? We're conflating two ideas, and we're conflating a third idea, because you say, have the free will to jump off a building. That's not freedom of will, that's freedom of action.
Of action,
So we're
exactly.
conflating three things. That is, we all have a will. We can't deny that. We all have likes, dislikes, desires, attachments. The question is our will free? And if it's free, in what sense is it free? To what extent is it free? But usually what people are talking about when they talk about free will is not freedom of will, but freedom of action.
Exactly.
I will say very briefly, because we're running out of time. We are eternally and infinitely free. Infinite freedom is our real nature, because we are Brahman and we alone exist. So there's nothing other than us to limit our freedom. So we have infinite being, infinite awareness, infinite happiness, infinite love, infinite freedom. That's our real nature. When we limit ourselves as the ego, we don't lose any of these things. They are seemingly limited. So our existence is now seemingly limited to the existence of this body. Our awareness is seemingly limited to this little view of this, from this perspective of this body. Our happiness is mixed up with a little bit of happiness, a little bit of misery. We experience it as a duality. Our love is, we experience in a form of desire, limited, petty desires, likes and dislikes and so on. Likewise, our freedom is limited, but our freedom can never be entirely denied. So we do have freedom of will, and we do have freedom of action. This is what Bhagavan called Ichcha Swatantra, freedom of will, and Kriya Swatantra, freedom of action. Swatantra means freedom or independence. We've got independence of will. Nobody can make you want something you don't want. So we've got freedom of will. We also have, to a certain extent, we have freedom of action. What we don't have freedom of is over the result of our action. When we do an action, the result, the fruit of the action is in the hands of God. That's what Bhagavan says in the beginning of Upadesha. The karma giving fruit is by the ordainment of God. So we have the freedom to want to do actions. We have the freedom to do the action. But the result of the action is entirely in God's hands. He determines what should be the result of each action. There's a lot more to explain, but that's all we have time for now.
Yes, Michael, thank you very much. And Jacques, come back in a month from now. If you want to follow up on that, you're welcome to do so. Somebody said, Michael, in the chat line, I recorded it, so I'll be able to read it later, that you've been on fire today. Actually, I think you're on fire every time you're with us, but we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It'll be July coming up,
Yes.
July the 6th, when we see you again.
Right.
And I do invite people to send in questions to me so I can pass them along to Michael to make sure that they get responded to. If not, the next month, perhaps thereafter. Thank you very much, Michael. We'll see you in July.
Okay. And Jacques, if you want to send your question, we can talk about that next time. If you send your question to, or some question related to this, then it'll get the ball rolling. And if you send that to Ted, we'll talk about it next time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
Right.
See you, everyone. See you in July. Have a great summer.
Okay.